Today, we're privileged to have Chris Kilculkin join us, an industry expert with a career spanning over 3 decades. His roles have ranged from VP of development on major hospitality franchises to SVP of acquisitions for a REIT, where he has successfully managed over $160 million in transactions. At Avison Young, Chris played a pivotal role in numerous significant deals, including the standout sale of Ascent on Main in Parker, Colorado. Outside the boardroom, Chris dedicates himself to managing efforts through Kitchen 1 for 1. We're going to chat about that a little bit. A nonprofit food truck he co-founded, which serves homeless and impoverished in Denver, providing not just meals, but dignity and connection. Our personal and professional paths have crossed over the past years. Chris has been instrumental in consulting our team on the Red Hotel project. We've collaborated on some design works, including the recent sale on the Ascent on Main, among other projects. Known for his perpetual cheer and deep expertise, Chris has become a true cherished friend and a trusted advisor as we've been working through this last year. Today, we're going to explore the wealth of Chris's knowledge of bringing the hospitality sector, discussing innovative strategies for the hotel transactions, and hear about his impactful work with Kitchen 1 for 1. Chris, pleasure to have you today.
It's like the intro.
You like that?
What was the cheer part?
Just perpetual cheer. Like every time I see it, Chris, you got a smile on your face. Even today, through the puffiness of this reaction, is full smile. So I do love that.
But I appreciate that. I tell you, I learned a long time ago. Attitude is everything. And if there's one thing God's blessed me with that I cherish, it's attitude.
And man, you bring it. Like,
joy. Yeah.
From the first time I've met you, that's just one thing. Like I never, always feel welcome to love. So thanks for bringing.
Thank you. Glad it shows.
So Chris, we've had a pleasure of kind of working together and getting to know each other over this last year, doing some projects together, as well as having you be an advisor on our board with the Red Hotel.
And what's super excited about? Can't wait to see that. Can't wait to stay there.
Me too. Yeah. So thanks for helping make that happen as we continue on our journey. We connected and I started learning a little bit about you as we're crossing paths on coffee shops, and I'm working on different projects. And you started telling me a little bit about your past and experience in working in hospitality sales and in that sector over the past 30 years. And it became clear that was a piece of understanding that we really needed to grasp in our team. I'd love to hear if you could just kind of back in a little bit about your hospitality experience over the past 30 years doing transactions realm, and what were some of your key milestones, and how did you get into hotel brokerage?
Gift from hospitality comes birth, right? I mean, that was just, I think, bestowed upon me. I love people and I love food. And fortunately, I found a wife that loves food as well. And we love to entertain. So anyway, that's another story we'll talk about later. But, fresh out of high school, I was in the hospitality business. I spent about 6 months at Texas Tech drinking. Some call that a semester. And I didn't really study much, but I had a lot of fun. And, through my high school years, I gathered with a group of friends, and we were called the family, and we used to throw all the keg parties. And we're pretty good at it. Actually. We did some big.
I probably would have enjoyed coming to your parties.
So after my short period at Texas Tech, I came back to Dallas, and I've always kind of had that entrepreneurial mind, and I always looked at ideas and how can I do things better. So anyway, we got a group of friends together, started a nightclub called Club Clearview. And that's where I really started working in hospitality. And I say that term working loosely because I lived on top of it. It was kind of a renegade club. We didn't have a liquor license in the beginning. And it was what raves have grown into. We started off just renting warehouse parties or warehouses and throwing a warehouse party. And lots of drugs, lots of alcohol, lots of debauchery. I went to rehab after my first year in Fairview. But I just knew I loved people. I loved having fun. I loved parties. And, that nightclub scene kind of put it all together for me. I continued my career in restaurants when my dad, who bought a restaurant in Frisco, Texas, way before Frisco became what Frisco is today. He bought a barbecue restaurant as a real estate investment for with two partners. So the three of them bought this restaurant and had a guy running it. One of the partners went bankrupt. The other one passed away. So we, the Kilcullins, went up and ran it as a family and loved that experience because it was the first time I really learn the nuts and bolts of the restaurant business. We never made any money at the restaurant because it was just a small town. Yeah. We made amazing barbecue though.
Oh, I bet.
It's where I learned how to smoke meat. And, we do cases and cases of brisket and chicken ribs. And, we had a big, huge cabinet smoker that was, so old school.
There's nothing like Texas barbecue.
No.
That is like the center of the culture and community down there.
It's kind of the center of the world. Right. People across the world just don't know it.
Yeah, it's coming.
To this day, I still love brisket. We use brisket for, big gatherings, and we do, a variety of things with it, but probably the best meat.
I'm trying to convince Amy right now to let me get a good smoker. We got Nate, my oldest, his graduation's coming up, and I've got some Texas family coming up. And so I know as part of that, like, expectation of coming of age, it is a barbecue and a brisket. So I might have to call some advice. Oh, no. It's going to be my smoker, but I'm just using it as an excuse.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I'll support that.
All right.
Ready dinner? Let's talk. Yeah, okay. I went back to work in the restaurant business after our restaurant closed down in Dallas. So I went to work at a place called the 80. Super popular kind of nightclub, restaurant, bar and grill. I was the kitchen manager there. It's actually where I met my wife.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was dating the bouncer. And he ended up cheating on her. And so
he got bounced.
Swung in. He got bounced. Yeah, good point. I wasn't making any money in the restaurant business. So I had a couple other jobs. And one of them, I was working part-time at Marshall Fields selling suits. And I sold this guy more suits than he came in to buy every time he came in to buy it. And so one day he was like, hey, I'd love to take you to lunch and share, a little bit of what I do and see if it might be a fit for you. And, like a week later, I was selling franchises. He was vice president of development for a company called Hospitality Franchise Systems way back when. And that's now the predecessor to who Wyndham Hotels is today.
So suits to franchise.
Yeah.
So the franchises were the hotels that you were starting in on, or
so Hospitality Franchise Systems owned Days Inn and Howard Johnson's.
Okay,
those three brands they own. This is in the early days of franchising. Back then, and this is 1992. Back then, most hotel companies like Hilton and Marriott, Hyatt still owned all their own hotels. Hospitality Franchise Systems was kind of early in this real aggressive franchise growth strategy, and they hired a bunch of guys like me, gave them a box of business cards, and said, go out there, stop at every exit on every interstate in your territory, knock on the door of every hotel, and get to know people. And when you develop a relationship with somebody and they start talking to you, call me. This is Leonard Smith,
okay,
my boss. And I'll walk you through it. I had no idea what I was doing. And as a matter of fact, the first year I did pretty well. I made like $80,000. Which, the previous year, I think I made 30. So it was a big jump.
And so when you're knocking on the doors to sell a franchise, you're talking to the already owners,
the general manager or owner. Could be Bob's Hotel.
And are you looking with the sale of a franchise to convert the mom and pop hotel to a brand? You're not selling them a new hotel.
No.
Okay.
Just all we were doing was selling them a new brand that could hang. And back then, there was no internet yet. So most people would drive down the road until they were tired, and then they'd see a sign that they recognized, and they'd pull off. And they'd, generally go in and say, what do you raise for tonight? There was no, cell phones.
Okay.
Or they had a directory, and they stayed only at Best Westerns, or only stayed at Holiday Inns, or only stayed at Days Inns. And they would just drive until they saw a hotel they recognized. And that recognition brought in more people. What we sold back then was, look, you're going to put this big sign on, a pole in front of your hotel so that people can see it for miles, and they're going to pull off here. And that's literally what they did. And they did it because of the recognition, and they felt like there was going to be some consistency, even though some of the brands that we owned weren't that consistent.
Yeah.
But it was safer choice than pulling into Bob's Hotel.
And so that brand awareness brings guests. And this was pre-booking.com and Expedia and all of those. How has that affected this work?
Really good question. Because, back then, one of the things that we would sell was, what is your reservation confirmation? How many people are calling 1-800-DAYS IN, which was a thing back then. There might still be one, but most likely it's gone. We would tell the owners that, our average occupancy of all of our hotels is, say, 75%. What is yours? And if it was 60 or 55%, we would have an advantage. We could bring something to the table. Second thing is, what's your average daily rate? And generally speaking, our average daily rate was higher than theirs because they're independent. Nobody knows them. And so then becomes a math decision of, all right, well, if your occupancy and ADR can help add $200,000 a year in revenue, then, what's it going to cost for me to get there? And we do what's called a property improvement plan. We'd inspect the hotel, tell them, look, you got to replace all your mattresses because they're 30 years old. Carpet's got to be replaced. Furniture is okay, you can keep that. But we had brand standards for Days Inn. We'd negotiate with them a little bit about what they can and couldn't do. We'd talk to headquarters about what they'd allow, and then we'd do a property improvement plan they would agree to. It would cost $5,000 a room. Back then, less than that. Then they would decide, all right, I think this is worth the risk. I'm going to sign a franchise agreement. They have to buy signs. They have to buy a reservation system and do all the renovations. We'd give them a little time to do it, but that's how it worked. They'd sign a 15, 20-year franchise agreement.
So this was in the 90s, and this would, at that time, you're converting kind of the small mom and pop or boutique hotels into franchises. And, they're getting the updated standards. They're getting the list of guests, and during those times, that would add a premium of what type of boost did you generally see going from a mom and?
Well, it really depends. Generally speaking, in the 15 years I was selling franchises, there were only a couple people that were dissatisfied. Brandly,
Hey, if you're liking this interview so far, we would love for you to share this with your friends, and please leave a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. This really helps us out a ton and helps other people like you find out about it as well. Now back to the episode.
And where do you see that now? Is it still
really
applicable?
Dramatic. That original question, that was before booking.com, before hotels.com. And when 9/11 happened, 9/11 obviously had nothing to do with that, but the hotel business was horrible. When these new brands came out, these new platforms came out, hotel owners were like, I'll sign up for anything that's going to bring me more rooms. And so all of these platforms came in ahead of the brand. The brand was the one that should have been spending the money, driving traffic to these hotels. But all these independent and smaller kind of third-tier brands didn't have the distribution that, say, a Hilton or a Marriott does. And so they kind of wedged themselves in between the hotel owner and the franchisor and created a place. And so they charge anywhere from 15 to 20% or above that, actually, in some cases. So if you're a hotel owner, now you're getting a $100 rate, and you're paying 20% to hotels.com, another 10 to 15% to your brand, and now you're left with $65. And that makes it hard to make a living. And so that's been real problematic in the industry, because that 20% is going to hotels.com or booking.com or whatever third-party platform that consumers using. It's not spending money on carpet. It's not spending money on wages, at the hotel at least. Not spending money on furniture, not paying a mortgage. It's just scraped off the top. Never even goes to Paris, Texas, or wherever that hotel is. And so that's a big dramatic change. Now, back to the second question you had. Nowadays, and I'll have some friends in the franchise business kind of cringe for this. There's specific brands that really matter. Hilton, Marriott, IHG, which is Holiday Inn Express. And then Hyatt of course. Hilton and Marriott are the dominant players in the industry because they hold the key to all of the frequent travelers, the guy that's spending 50 to 125 nights a year. I used to spend 130 nights a year on the road all the time. That's when I traveled so much. And that guy is loyal to that brand because he's coming home and taking his wife and kids out on vacation every year, free, through those rewards nights. Below those brands, below the Hampton, Fairfield, Courtyard, all those major brands that everyone knows within the Marriott and Hilton family, it becomes kind of second tier. And the reason that's important is because just like I described a minute ago with Hotels.com, Hilton Honors members or Marriott Bonvoy members pay a 5% fee for that loyalty program, plus the franchise fee. So they're paying about 20% of their gross. And their gross is much higher. So that rate that I said a minute ago, $100 rate, Days Inn or wherever, that guy is now spending $150, $175, $200 a night because he's not really paying it. He's on an expense account. But his company allows for that. That's built in their budget. And so that let's call it $150 rate just for math, he's paying 20%, the franchisee is paying 20%, so $30 to the franchise company, and he's netting $130, okay, before all those expenses. Much better than that Days Inn customer that's getting a lower rated customer because they're looking for just the cheapest rate they can, and then they're paying that, exorbitant fee to Hotels.com and their franchisor. It's a massive difference. Those are why they're called institutional brands, because institutional investors will buy those brands and buy those properties because they'll make anywhere from 30 to 40% net operating income or debt service off their gross room revenue. Secondary or third tier brands like, Days Inn, Choice Hotels, Best Western, Wyndham, lower volume of gross revenue and lower operating or net operating income because of all those added expenses. So
where do you see the boutique hotel space coming in on this? Maybe talk a little bit about, let's talk a little bit about Ascent, and then let's get back to Slumber and Dough and, what's kind of bringing your mind on that way. And then I noticed Ascent was a major sell that you recently did, but not a branded hotel, correct? And it didn't sell. They didn't convert it to. They're not converting to a brand.
No.
And so what is that niche and place right now in the market?
Well, I think the industry has seen a change, especially post-COVID, after people got out of their lockdowns. Everyone just went out into the wilderness. Right, there was this pent up demand for travel. They still couldn't really travel to Europe, and so there was a lot of travel into national parks and outdoor, and there was this big resurgence into experiential travel. With that came this need for unique experiences. And prior to COVID, there were these big brands like Autograph within the Marriott family, Curio within the Hilton family. They were already trying to capture that boutique experience within their brands because consumers, back in the day when I sold those Days Inn franchises, people are looking for that consistency because they've been screwed so many times. They went in, they paid $50 because there were some pictures on the lobby front desk about how the room looked, and they got in there and it was a shit box.
Maybe comparable to our Airbnb boom that we've had.
Yeah, some similar to that because there's been some bad experiences there.
We're going to have a pretty good mix of
but overall, people are happy with, I think, Airbnb. That blew up the franchise world. So back in 1992, I think 95-ish was about when Holiday Inn Express and Hampton really started to take off. That was when the really invention of what was called limited service hotels. Prior to that, it was Holiday Inn, it was Ramada, Quality Inn, and they all had restaurants. Operating a restaurant was a drag on hotel operations for the most part, on roadside hotels. And so these select or limited service hotels started to really blow up. It was just a rooms only experience. And, continental breakfast was just beginning. It was a coffee and juice and donut. That's what you got when you went into a hotel room back then. And sometimes they even cut the donuts in half. I mean, it was just a real cheap experience. So those really took off and, started just popping up at every, intersection along the highway. And so people were drawn to that consistent experience. I know exactly what a Hampton Inn experience can look like.
It's kind of the McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
It's
not going to be great, but it's going to be good.
Totally right. That was the trend over the last, 20 years from the, 90s through 2010, call it. And it's still popular. But I would say, there's been this new yearning for experiences, and customers have started to, they're kind of getting tired of that looked-in, plain old ordinary experience. All the brands know that, and they're trying to do things that make them more creative, more fun. And that coffee and donuts from early on is now blown up into a very expensive breakfast for the operator. And none of it's any good. I mean, it's all prepackaged food.
So who's doing this well out there? That
from a branding perspective, nobody, in the select and limited service space. But upper scale and luxury, Autograph crushes it. Curio crushes it. And they've got also, even more high-end luxury collections above that. Marriott has the luxury collection, and they're all boutique experiences. And consumers are starving for it. They love it, and they're paying for it. Boutique and independent hotels are growing at a faster rate than branded hotels. They have been for the last several years from a RevPAR, revenue per available room perspective. I think that consumers want that. They're growing just fatigued by that templated, model. Yeah. The Ascent on Main, that was a long transaction because it was a very broken development. I sold a resort up in Estes Park called the Fall River Village. It was kind of my first experience into real boutique hospitality. It was a, $40+ million transaction. Really spectacular. Perfect timing because of the whole experiential travel post-COVID. But the Ascent, I love that boutique experience, right? As a consumer, but also as a hotel broker. And the Ascent was kind of that vision. That was the developer that was building the Ascent. He wanted to create that in Parker. The challenge is that he didn't know what he was doing. He made some big mistakes. As I said a minute ago, it's hard for hotel restaurants to make money. He's built a 51-room hotel and put 5 restaurants in it. Thinking it was going to be a superhero. It failed. So bank took it over, and then we had to pick up the pieces and try to build an opportunity for a new buyer to come in and take it over. It took us almost a year, but actually it's a year. But we found the perfect operator, somebody that just loves boutique, and they just have a real eye for a creative eye for fixing broken things and really utilizing every square inch of space.
And so it seems like consistency is a bit helpful. Like McDonald's proved that by driving, going from all mom and pop to let's create something that's consistent so you get this experience. And then it seems like we've had a little bit of return back to, whether it's the, on the restaurant side, just that custom, feel for a restaurant, or the hotel side, boutique experience. But there seems like it's kind of a little bit back to the Wild West and danger, where you can come in and not take some of that knowledge or experience that Marriott or Hilton has proven that actually works. And you may or may not end up with a great product or a great service, like this said, may put in too many restaurants, may overdo it or underdo it. But it seems like, it's kind of like this experimental space where you might also be able to come up with something that's really great. People love beyond just, the standard. So what are some of the things to watch for that are making boutique hotels great versus trying to do it on your own and ended up in a place where you would have been better off following?
Wow, you just asked for the magic sauce.
Yeah, what's the sauce?
Yeah, I don't know what the magic sauce is. Every market's different, and I would say that answer comes specifically to the location of the hotel. If you've got strong demand generators around the hotel and none of those quality institutional brands are available, then you should look at doing something boutique. You've got to spend money to make sure that you have a product that separates yourself, that brings people in. There's never been a better time to be an independent. Back to those OTAs that we talked about, that were kind of the enemy of the industry from an operator's perspective. Those now can provide as all of the distribution that you used to need to go to a brand for. If you don't have Hampton, you don't have Courtyard, you don't have any of those higher quality brands available to you, and you don't want to be a Days Inn or Quality Inn or something like that, and you want to provide excellence, and that's really the key. We were talking about unreasonable hospitality when we started. It's all about service. That templated experience we were talking about a minute ago. I think most of these hotel brands have created systems in place to deal with customers as they come through as a product. They're checking people in with a smile. They're asking them how their day was, but they're trying to just do it as a process to get them out of the way so they can deal with the next customer behind them. And they built these franchise models of this is what you do to breakfast and this is how you greet people in the afternoon. But in many cases, they've forgotten that it's people and people. When we can look people in the eyeballs and truly connect with them, that right there is what hospitality is all about. And if you as an independent can train your staff to love people, and you and I share our faith, love people the way Jesus would, if he were sitting behind the front desk, that's your secret sauce.
Yeah.
And then, the product sells itself. I think more and more today, all of those rooms at every different brand at quality levels, and I'm talking about Hampton, Hilton Garden, Courtyard, Fairfield, all the bigger brands, they're all pretty much the same. I mean, the new Hampton Inns you go in today, it almost looks like a Hilton Garden.
So maybe, this, I think this would be a good transition into what you've been doing one for one. Kind of this idea of loving like Jesus in the hospitality realm. What have you learned in one for one? And maybe, first kind of tell us a little bit about what is one for one.
So Kitchen One for One's a nonprofit food truck that my partner Mark and I started 6 years ago. This is our 7th year. And I was serving at Red Rocks Church. And I was kind of leading all their food and beverage, did all their coffee, and trained all their volunteers to provide that coffee experience.
Which is where we originally crossed paths. Oh. I was on a coffee team there. Yeah. Just a little stuff.
Yeah, forgot about that. Yeah. So then I started doing all their food for life groups and so forth. And then one day, one of the principals, Eric Parks, who kind of led their business development operations, invited me down to a place called Purple Door Coffee.
Oh, yeah.
To explore buying coffee from them at an elevated price, because what they did is they took people off the street and mentored them into the workforce.
Yeah.
Taught them how to brush their teeth in the morning, wake up on time, show up on time, all the things that, you'd think you would have been taught by your family or your parents. But some of these people today still don't get that. I asked them if they needed food. Ironically, that was the week after the Broncos got beat to a smithereen by the Seattle Seahawks. I had catered a big leadership group for Red Rocks, a Super Bowl party.
Okay.
All their staff.
Yeah.
And everyone lost their appetite in the first 5 minutes. So I had a lot of leftover food.
Yeah.
Anyway, they introduced me to Sucks This in downtown.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that's when we started to realize, all right, there's a homeless population that needs to be served. And we, as Red Rock, started serving Sock's Place. So we were making food for probably 800 people every Saturday with a group of volunteers. And it got to be so big that it was just too big, I thought. Too big for me. I was, getting busier and busier at work, traveling more and more. I was vice president of development for the Midwest, and just, things were just crazy. And this had grown to be so big that I just didn't think I could do it on my own anymore. And so I stepped away. There was Eric Parks, again, did a message on volunteers that stepped out in their faith without knowing where God was going to take them. But it just said yes. And that was a pivotal part. And I didn't really realize I had done that until he kind of articulated it in this message. And there was a guy sitting in the room, the name of Mark Sunderhoose, who had just sold his business. He also lives in Evergreen. And we had met each other. We were acquaintances, but not friends. But he heard this message, and God had told him to buy a food truck. He had no idea what to do with the food truck, but he said yes. Our two yeses came together and created Kitchen 1 for 1.
Wow.
It was about a year before we actually rolled off the food truck line. And originally we thought, we're going to sell food. You buy one, we'll give one away. And we quickly realized, actually, one of our board members, a guy named Steve Babb, said, I was watching you guys sell tacos, and you're going to have to sell a lot of tacos through that window to make enough money to actually give anything away. So maybe we just pivot and just start raising money and tell people, look, I'll take your $20 or convert that into 10 tacos. And we did. And we started showing up as the Denver Rescue Mission. And we had massive lines of people. I bet. And the key to what we do is we don't go out and get a bunch of, expired food or donated food and then try to make food out of it. We buy everything from scratch, high quality food, and we make the food that we would want to serve Jesus if he was walking through one of those food lines. That first day I walked through Sock's place, I heard God say, these are the least of these. I was like, oh, shoot, I've heard that message before. So I guess I need to be serving these people. That's what it's been for us. And so Mark and I have, just complimented each other. And we've got a team of people now and, probably 300 volunteers that love serving. And really this last year, we've realized that we don't just serve the people on the street. We serve our volunteers way more.
Yeah.
We're mentoring to them. We're discipling to them. And we're teaching them.
I think there's a lot of people sitting in the pews that, want to figure out how to engage in community service or something like that, but, don't know how.
Yeah. And I learned that part right there from Red Rocks. And Red Rocks does things with excellence. Everything they do. I wanted to serve the best coffee that I could. I didn't want it to be a percolator sitting in the corner. So we would, buy dark roast coffee and make really strong coffee and serve it with real cream. Did everything with excellence. But we created a volunteer platform. You could just come in one Sunday a month. That's all we ask for. You just pick an hour and a half to serve with us, and we'll teach you how to do everything we're going to do. From there, we would kind of harvest volunteer leaders, team leaders, what we call them. And so they would manage the shift of the 9 a.m. service. There was actually a shift that started before 9 a.m. and then a shift that, kind of transitioned between 9 and 11, and then a shift that broke down.
Now, this is for Red Rocks Coffee.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we learned how to just create a place to plug them in, just like you described.
Absolutely.
If somebody raised their hand, we'd show them how to do it. And then once they'd serve once, they'd serve again.
And what I loved about Red Rocks Coffee is it wasn't, like you said, just a percolator where you got your own drink. Like, you engage the volunteers.
Yes.
So they're actually serving, the coffee. They're asking questions. They're getting to greet people with a smile. And that's a different experience for the volunteer, just like it is for the guests coming in.
Yeah. I mean, we weren't making cappuccinos, but, we were making amazing coffee. And we did engage with them. It would be the first connection point.
So funny. I didn't realize, like, you're behind all of that. I had spent some time serving the coffee. So it's funny how many, small world connections. So you taking that, this idea, I mean, really kind of circles back around to radical hospitality, to unreasonable hospitality, that you're doing things with excellence, serving the least of these, kind of circling back, to the hotels, kind of this, branded hotel of, learning how to do things consistently, but maybe not with such excellence. And then you've spent a good amount of the last 5-10 years. How long has it 1 for 1 been going? 7 years, developing, this ministry that's serving the least of these, also ministry within churches, learning how to do that with excellence. I assume there was some gap that you saw in the branded hotel that then kind of speared this idea of Slumber and Dough.
Yeah.
So maybe chat a little about that.
Yeah. So when I first started selling hotels, you could build a hotel for $18,000 per room. That was a Days Inn or a Super 8, kind of the primary brands that we sold. There wasn't a lot to them. It was just a room and a continental breakfast. Now it costs about $140,000 to $150,000 per room to build a hotel. Nicer hotels, they're bigger boxes. Those were 2-story stick construction, cheap build. So now the cost to build a hotel and operate a hotel are much higher. So when you lose a Hampton Inn or a Holiday Inn Express or a Fairfield Inn franchise, those hotels generate, I'm going to use a round number, $100 in revenue per available room. That's the gross revenue divided by the 365 days divided by the number of rooms. If you lose that brand, you're going to lose 30% of that business. Like I described earlier with some of those economy brands, you're going to end up with a secondary brand. That is a direct loss in value to that hotel. That hotel that used to sell for $8 million is now going to sell for $5.5 to $6 million. And so that creates the opportunity is, all right, how do I buy some of those cheaper hotels that have lost their franchise? I shouldn't say cheaper hotels. How do I buy some of those hotels cheaper and then improve them? I don't want to take you to a Days Inn, right, or a Super 8, because the customer base that's renting those rooms is looking for affordable accommodations. But how do I create that boutique experience that customers looking for at the mid-market level? The family that's staying at a Hampton Inn that isn't traveling, or the business traveler that's not traveling 50 nights a year, they're forced to either spend $180, $200 a night for a Hampton, brand new Hampton, or downgrade to an economy product. And I want to be kind of right in the middle of that. I also want to create a breakfast that actually people want to eat. Slumber and Dough is going to be a place that you go for the room, but you stay for the breakfast. And we're going to bake an actual breakfast in the morning. You're going to see, just like you go into a Mexican restaurant, I want people to see and smell their breakfast, and not just some girl come around the corner with a plate of pre-warmed food that came out of a cardboard box. It tastes like these brands, they provide an excellent room, but they begrudgingly give breakfast away because the brand requires it and customers demand it. And they've tried to create a breakfast that's easy to replicate, and everything is pre-made. Everything's full of preservatives. They warm it up. The eggs are absolutely horrible. I mean, they excel at below average. And it almost feels like the industry has just decided our customers don't like good food. They're going to eat whatever we give them for free. And that's going to be my differentiator, because we're going to provide a food that people want to come in and eat.
Well, I'm excited to see it. I think it's always beautiful how I think each of us our life experience and what we've done has created us for this moment. And I think it's obvious to see, like in your life, Chris, kind of that connection from, first working through the branded hotels to then, developing excellency in food and beverage, and even having that in your past. Like it's we pull those things in to what he has next. Yeah. And so I'm very excited to see what happens.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to see it happen too.
Yeah.
I've got a hotel I've got targeted right now.
All right.
You've looked at it.
Yeah. I think we're going to make something truly special with that. I'm excited about what your brain cooks up and what we can help you put together. So it should be really good.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Radical Hospitality Podcast. If you learned something new or you found this entertaining, please leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have a project that you're excited about and you're ready to talk to an architect, visit us at therouteteam.com and schedule your free virtual consult with me or one of my team members. That's therouteteam.com.